Welcome everyone to the first webinar in our new series on integrating with ArchivesSpace. Each webinar in this series will highlight how ArchivesSpace integrates with another application used in archives that our ArchivesSpace members have worked on or requested. This webinar series will feature both open source and proprietary systems. Today's webinar will feature an ArchivesSpace integration with Preservica, a digital preservation software solution used by archives and cultural heritage institutions across the globe. In this webinar, Wendy Goodier and Erica Schumann of Preservica will discuss the integration of ArchivesSpace and Preservica and demo the Preservica ArchivesSpace connector. This tool provides an easy and automated way to synchronize metadata and organizational hierarchy between the two systems, simplifying the ingest of digital content and preserving updates made after ingest. Users maintain the same ArchivesSpace record view across both physical and digital materials, avoiding the need to rekey metadata. Afterwards, Sarah Cogley of University at Buffalo Libraries will walk through her repository's decision to use ArchivesSpace and Preservica together. She will offer insight into the process of integration, including decisions that were made, lessons learned, and how integrations have made life easier. Sarah will also include a demo of the University at Buffalo's integrated web presence. We will hold all questions until the Q&A session at the end. If you type your question into the chat, it will be read and answered during the Q&A. You will notice your microphone and camera were muted when you entered. We ask that you keep your microphone muted until the Q&A session at the end. Your presenters today are Wendy Goodier and Erica Schumann of Preservica and Sarah Cogley of University at Buffalo Special Collections. Wendy Goodier is the product owner at Preservica. Based out of the UK office, Wendy works closely with Preservica users worldwide to help understand their experience with the technology and how Preservica can make their day-to-day easier. She works closely with customers like the University at Buffalo Libraries to keep the ArchivesSpace and Preservica integration up to date with any changes in technology or business needs. Erica Schumann is Marketing Manager North America at Preservica. As part of her role, Erica helps to highlight and share stories from Preservica users with the wider community to support best practice and peer engagement in digital preservation. Sarah Cogley is the digital archivist for the University at Buffalo Special Collections. Sarah's responsibilities include preserving, processing, and providing access to the collection's unique digital resources and providing leadership on digital collections and digital preservation standards and policies. Sarah previously held the position of processing archivist for University Archives, also at UB, and assistant archivist at Sarah Lawrence College. She's a certified archivist, holds the Digital Archives Specialist certification from the Society of American Archivists, and earned her MSIS from SUNY Albany. Welcome, Wendy, Erica, and Sarah.
Thank you, Jessica. This is Erica here. So thank you everyone for joining us while Wendy's getting it set up here. What Wendy and I are going to be going through a little bit here is just to give you some background on Preservica in a short demo before we hand it over to Sarah to just talk about how she's worked with us in ArchivesSpace for the University of Buffalo. So as you can see here from our mission statement, we live digital. Preservation is in our blood, especially digital preservation. So just a little bit of our history. We've been around for over a decade. We started as a project for the UK National Archives and have since then really evolved to have numerous different customers, and we've been driven to influence many of the tools and standards in digital preservation, including the OAIS, the Open Archival Information System Standard, which drives a lot of how we set up our software. You can see here that we have over 200 different institutions throughout the globe. These are just a snapshot of the ones here in the US. Some of these here are both Preservica and ArchivesSpace users, and some of them have the integration set up. We have some of our experts like the University of Buffalo, who we'll hear from in a little bit, to our newest member here, the University of Notre Dame, who will hopefully be setting up their integration in the next few months and shortly here. All of these all these institutions do use active digital preservation and to use and protect and share their institutional records, historical collections, and research data. And as you can see here from the AP, we do go beyond just academic libraries. We have a number of national institutions, government, and corporate archives. And a lot of it, if we're going through here, is that our community is really a big part of it. And as Wendy will show you here, in a little bit. A lot of the integration that we've built is based on the feedback from our community. Sorry, Wendy, I keep jumping around a little bit here, so if you want to go to the next slide. So a little bit more about our software. So Preservica can be used for all forms and formats of digital content, if it's born digital or digitized, and tons of different records, as we talked about, some cultural, some institutional, things like that. A significant benefit is that it's really easy to use. We make it easy for you to ingest your material and then have a live archive where you can rearrange and enrich post-ingest on all of your files that you have in there. We also make it very easy, as you'll see throughout this, to make it accessible to the public if that is something you're interested in, and help you get online so people are searchable, and building that up from there. So if we want to go to the next slide, we have just a little bit here on what our ArchivesSpace integration looks like. So as Wendy will walk you through a little bit better than I can do right now, because I'm in marketing and she's much more technical than I am, we help you maintain a single catalog view. So during the ingest of digital content for safekeeping into Preservica, the catalog hierarchy and descriptive metadata is automatically recreated in Preservica. An easy click will link your content from ArchivesSpace into Preservica, and it's all added as a catalog entry. You can automatically synchronize after ingests. Subsequent changes to your catalog hierarchy or metadata in ArchivesSpace are automatically synchronized to Preservica on an ongoing basis, even after ingest. In addition, digital objects deleted from Preservica will be removed from the catalog entry. Finally, we have metadata and hierarchy mapping set up so that whenever you have the integration comes in with default metadata and hierarchy mapping ready to go. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Wendy to do a short demo of this integration. If you would like to see a general demo of the Preservica platform, we are holding a demo next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and I will put the link to register here in our chat.
Thank you so much, Erica, and hello to everybody from Britain. We're sitting in the pouring rain here, and we've sort of got the weather come over from you a week later, and it's rather noisy outside, so I hope it's not a problem. Okay, so what I'm going to do is give you a quick demo of Preservica, including and focusing on the content, linking the content to ArchivesSpace. Clearly, a lot of what people spend their time doing is getting the digital content into Preservica, making sure that it's identified and able to be preserved. And the last thing you want to do is have to redo the work that you've done in ArchivesSpace of forming hierarchies and entering metadata. So what we'll do as part of this is to show you how we actually link together the content that you're putting in as a digital object into your existing hierarchy. Show how it creates the hierarchy for you, so that's all handled for you, and how the metadata is exchanged. What you've put back into ArchivesSpace is brought over into Preservica, and without stealing the thunder, as it were, of Sarah, also to show you some way of making it accessible and enabling you to link back to ArchivesSpace. So if I go over to my system, not quite sure where the annotates come from. If anybody can get rid of it, that would be lovely. What we have then is an ArchivesSpace here. And I'm not very imaginative in my setups of ArchivesSpace, but what you can see is I've got a repository, a resource, and various levels of archival objects with some fairly straightforward titles for me. And you can see that already I did this morning. I've connected some actual real content to my series. In this case, I've got about 6 or 7 digital objects in there. And so this is the end result of what we've got in ArchivesSpace. And this is then the same thing in Preservica. So what has happened in linking every one of my digital objects in there is gone and said, okay, what do I need to put ahead above you? What hierarchy do you want? And it's built the hierarchy for you. And so I can see here that I've got my archival objects 1 and 2 that you can see, and it's put the digital objects underneath them. And you can see the thumbnails coming up. for those as well. And this archival object here is the one where I had about 6 digital objects earlier on. But what you will notice that at the moment in ArchivesSpace, I've got these 3 archival objects here. I've only got 2 at the moment in Preservica. Now, before we move off and look at the integration there, just to say that ArchivesSpace, Preservica very simply separates out according to the OIS model that you might want to do ingest actions and workflows, to access things and particularly search, to perform preservation actions, to do all sorts of data management like measuring and checking fixity, to change tags, so whether things are visible to people, and then all sorts of administration functions as well. So it's all from a single menu at the top here. And if I'm looking at something here and I've actually got then a folder that contains content, very quickly we get the information about it here. So just a very quick view of what Preservica does for you as the main archival view. So for most people who are putting data into Preservica, they will use our web app upload and preparation tool, or put as we like to call it. And I've started setting a project up earlier just to make it a bit easier. And what you can see here is I've got a folder, which as a reminder to me, it's going to go over under archival object 809. It was just a bit easier. I got those up by just dragging, dropping files up into this upload area if they're within the limits of my browser. And if not, we have a holding area where we can drag more things up. And if you'd like to see the demo for that, that will all be part of the one that Erica will explain later. But the key bit is we get those up there. We make sure the name of the folder is the one we want it to be for the digital object. And we tell it here that we want it to go under archival object 809. And we actually then run a save and upload process, tell it where to go, and off it goes at the moment. So it's on its way over to Preservica, and the workflow is sitting at the back of here, waiting to receive that and to form and to follow the instructions that it's being given. And so we can quickly see that we've got an ingest going on here. It's doing some virus checks. It's moving on quickly with all those things. And as well as doing the items in here, the key ones, once it's got it in there, it'll do a indexing, a full index. It will create a thumbnail for us. Potentially it could run an OCR process and things like that. And so then if we go back, when it's finished, it's still active. When it says completed for me at the top, it's just off doing its chatting to ArchivesSpace. So I hope ArchivesSpace wants to chat to it. Then it will do the final linking. And what we do in that process is we exchange a bit of data. ArchivesSpace is the master in all of this. So it will take the data from ArchivesSpace and copy the metadata back into Preservica. It will look at the structure and copy that structure back into Preservica. And it will just pop a little bit of data into 1 or 2 areas for me into the into ArchivesSpace to record that for me. So while we're just letting that finish off, what we will do is we will pop over and look. It'll be there in a short while, I'm sure. Yep, 1, 2, 3, and the third one's come up. There's our digital object under 809. And once again, you can see the 3 documents I had there that I wanted to do. A bit of an obsession with bus stops for some reason. So, and then back in ArchivesSpace, if I refresh that here, then my digital object should turn up here when I reopen that. So there's the process done. And you don't have to sit and watch it. It's just that I do. Of course, that's great, and it's there, and you know it's there. And you can change your text, you can go ahead and write more about your object now, you can see it. But what's really important is that you could access it. And so one of the things that we've done to exchange with the data, if you're in your public interface, is that we have gone and put in here a link that links back to Preservica. So, and without stealing all of Sarah's thunder later on, what we can do is if we are in ArchivesSpace, we can jump back to the item directly in what we call universal access. And so at this point, Sarah, I think I'll let you take over and explain how you use it. Thank you very much.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet, Sarah.
Not yet. Okay, sorry about that. Let me try again. Okay, how about now?
We can see it now.
Okay, terrific. My apologies. Okay, terrific. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Wendy. My name is Erica Cogley, and I work at the University of Buffalo, where I process foreign digital manuscripts and institutional records for the library's special collections. And I'm going to talk a bit today about UB's experience integrating ArchivesSpace and Preservica. So I'm going to give you a little bit of context, some background information about how we got to where we are today. UB's Special Collections has 4 units, the University Archives, the Poetry Collection, History of Medicine Collection, and Rare and Special Books. Across these 4 units, we have 2 archivists who focus on processing and description, the digital archivist, that's me, and the archivist for Special Collections, who is my colleague, Marie Elia. And together we jointly supervise 3 project archivists and 1 graduate assistant. So the University Archives and the Poetry Collection were the first units to adopt ArchivesSpace in 2014. So we have been ArchivesSpace users now for, I guess, about 5 years. And since 2014, 5 other units in the UB libraries have adopted ArchivesSpace, although the University Archives and the Poetry Collection are still the principal users of the system, and we have the largest number of resource records out of all the 4 units. Before we started using ArchivesSpace, the staff in Special Collections managed collection information in many, many spreadsheets, and we also encoded and published our finding aids using XML editors and XTF. In 2015, we began our search for a system that would help us manage and preserve our digital content, and about a year later, we joined the Preservica user community, so that would have been 2016. Before 2016, the Special Collections really had no formal approach, or staff for that matter, who were dedicated to collecting, processing, or preserving our born digital content. So what that means is that our files were sometimes stored on the university's network, sometimes they were on external hard drives, but most often our born digital files were left on whatever storage media the donation was delivered on, so floppy disks, DVDs, thumb drives, things like that. So when we started thinking about tool integration, we knew that we wanted to look for a digital preservation system that would integrate with ArchivesSpace. And this was towards the top of our wish list for a couple different reasons. We were concerned about efficiency. We wanted to describe our content once and have that description shared across systems. We also wanted to minimize the errors that are inevitably caused by redundant data entry. We also needed a platform that would help our users discover our digital content through our finding aids. And we wanted to provide our patrons with a platform to access and download the digital content if they wished. And in addition to those things, we also required a system that would be relatively easy for users to learn, staff on the staff side, but also to administer the system. The libraries has, I think, about 1.5 programmers on staff, and these individuals already administer a lot of systems across the libraries, so we didn't want to add to their workload. So a cloud-based system like Preservica kind of fit our checklist. So when we adopted Preservica in 2016, we did it as a 1-year pilot project. My colleagues and I attended webinars and training sessions. We talked to a lot of other users, and we identified a few diverse test collections to ingest into the system. And we went ahead and linked these collections to ArchivesSpace and then did a lot of kind of testing to see what it looked like and how it worked together. So when we were planning for the integration, there were a few things that we knew for sure, and then there were a few things that we knew we didn't know. So first of all, I want to cover what we did know, and that was that we knew that Preservica had specific workflows for linking content and synchronizing description with ArchivesSpace. And we also knew that those workflows were more or less predefined. We knew how we would structure our digital content in Preservica. And we also knew that we had internal institutional best practices for description. So we felt confident in that. But on the other hand, we didn't really know what the user experience would be like for our researchers who navigated from one system to another. And ultimately, our ArchivesSpace public user interface went live at about the same time as universal access. We also weren't 100% sure about how the structure of content in Preservica would map to the ArchivesSpace data model. And related to this, we weren't sure which fields in ArchivesSpace would be edited by Preservica. And so to make it a little bit more complicated, prior to integrating with Preservica, we didn't really have a lot of experience working with digital objects in ArchivesSpace, but we did have our best practices to help us describe our digital objects. So that was helpful. So a little bit more about our best practices for describing our collections. A big part of establishing a digital preservation program is the development of best practices. So shortly after we began this integration, we realized that as a department, special collections needed to be more consistent when describing our digital records, and that simply applying our descriptive practices for analog collections wasn't really going to be enough. So I worked with my colleagues in special collections, Marie, who I mentioned earlier, and also the university archivist, Amy Bills, to update our best practices for description. So we developed guidelines for describing digital content, and we also updated our existing guidelines for describing analog collections. And the result of this is a LibGuide that our staff and students use when processing analog, digital, and hybrid collections. See on the screen that this is just a screenshot of our LibGuide. And then a little bit more detail, these are all of the fields that we use, all of the elements that we use when we describe digital records at the collection level, series and file level, and also our digital objects. I wanted to note that our LibGuide is very much an evolving document. We update it a lot, and that's based on conversations that we have as coworkers, but also based on our processing strategies and the type of content that we collect. So now I'm going to jump out, similar to what Wendy just did for you, and give you a quick tour of the public side of these two systems so you can see what it looks like when our researchers use them. Okay, so what you're looking at here is what we call our finding aid database. This is the public user interface for ArchivesSpace. We've done a little bit of customization on our public user interface, so it's branded for UB, but it should look pretty familiar to most ArchivesSpace users. This is a finding aid for UB Today, which is an older alumni magazine that was published by the university. This is a pretty simple collection. It contains print and digital issues of UB Today, and it's very straightforward, as you can see by the collection organization. It's just arranged in chronological order. But what I did want to mention about this finding aid is that whenever we have finding aids that have that have digital content, we do a little bit of editing in our notes, and we have a couple extra fields that we add to the finding aids. And these are all kind of outlined in our best practices for description. So the first thing that I wanted to mention is our users will see that we have an additional extent statement that describes the extent of the digital content. And then we also make sure to describe our content, how it's arranged in the arrangement note, and also in the acquisition information. And we include language in the processing information about any digital preservation that's occurred on these files. And then all of our finding aids that have content in Preservica will have a link here to what we call our UB Digital Archives, which is the universal access platform. And then our users can select any of the archival objects that have a digital object attached to them. And what they'll see is a record like this. So again, there's an extent statement, We also include a special viewing instruction statement, which is essentially a terms of, similar to a terms of access that just notes that these files are available on our online repository. And then you'll see here we have live links, thumbnails that will take our users directly to universal access. So if I select that, you'll see now we're in UB's universal access. Again, we've done just a little bit of customization. So it's kind of the UB blue, so it's not, the adjustment between systems isn't incredibly noticeable for our patrons. But you'll see that this is a PDF file. At the top here, we include a little bit of Dublin core metadata. Our users can navigate down through the PDF. Looks like it was very cold in Buffalo when this magazine was published. And then our researchers can also, they could print this document if they wished. They could download the document if they wished. And then they can navigate up through the file directory. They can also browse all of our digital collections if they clicked on this link. And finally, we include a link back to our ArchivesSpace public user interface here at the top. So I wanted to mention that the UB Today collection is a very uncomplicated one. Other collections that we have, for example, our faculty papers or manuscript collections, are often a lot more complex in their arrangement, especially when original order is kind of maintained during processing. So the file directories might be very complex, folders within folders and that kind of thing. Sometimes I think can be challenging for patrons to navigate through, but we hope that good description in the finding aid kind of assists them with this. One last thing about universal access, our content, the way we've structured it here at UB, it largely mirrors the structure of our description in ArchivesSpace. However, there are other ways to organize digital content, and Preservica allows for this. So for example, some users have selected to kind of use universal access more as an exhibition space. So you can curate assets, files from various different collections and arrange them, and they can display as one kind of exhibition on universal access. We haven't chosen to do that here at UB, but I think other institutions have chosen to do that. So I'm going to close out of this. All right, so I'm just going to leave you with a few thoughts that I have about kind of looking forward and the challenges that I think we are going to kind of deal with as we move forward with these two systems together. So the first is that in the very near future, UB plans to integrate two ArchivesSpace repositories with our single Preservica tenancy, and Wendy tells me that this is very much possible. So currently, all the content that we have in Preservica is part of the university archives. However, soon we hope to start processing foreign digital records for the poetry collection, which is a separate repository in ArchivesSpace, and we do plan to link those to Preservica as well. So that's kind of exciting. The other thing that I look forward to is bringing ArchivesSpace metadata that's already in Preservica and publishing it in universal access, so that the notes, the agents, and the subjects that we work so hard on creating in ArchivesSpace are searchable in universal access. And lastly, challenges that just come when you're working with two different systems, especially when one system is open access and the other is proprietary. I found that sometimes speaking the language of these two systems can be challenging because the terminology can sometimes be different and confusing. It's also sometimes challenging because timelines for development and the releases aren't always kind of aligned with each other, and priorities might not be the same. And lastly, about different use cases. In my discussions with other users who have integrated these two systems, sometimes we set up the systems a little differently. Maybe our content is structured not identical to each other, or we use ArchivesSpace a little differently. And I think that these systems are fairly flexible, which can be really good, but also challenging. And I think that what I've learned, I think the best thing that I've learned about this through this whole process is that both of these systems have really large user communities, and the users are motivated, they're eager to talk about their experiences and help each other with troubleshooting and developing solutions. And so I think that the user communities for both of these systems are really the best assets of each of these tools. So I'm going to leave you with my contact information. I'm happy to talk to anybody offline if you'd like. And these also are links to our LibGuides for description and also a LibGuide that we've created for digital preservation here at UB. And then I believe Wendy might like to say one more thing about Preservica.
So actually, I was going to jump in here. This is Erica again. Thank you very much, Sarah and Wendy, for all of that information so far here. Before we go into some of the Q&A, which I see I have a lot of questions here, just wanted to give you a little bit of how to follow up here with Preservica. So we do have a number of resources on our website that you can see here, including one that is about the catalog integration. So that's the link you see there. You can follow us on Twitter at Preservica.com or at Preservica. Or if you want to have a private demo, you can either contact us at info@preservica.com or again send out the link to the demo that we are doing next week along with a survey. If you fill out the survey, we will follow up with you with some information about the integration. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you, everyone. That was great. If you are interested in following up with Wendy, Erica, or Sarah, we will make these slides available whenever we make the recording of this webinar available. So all of this information will be, you will be able to find this information again. You didn't have to write it down very quickly. There are a lot of questions in the chat, so we will read them in order. Let's get back up to the top. And Wendy, Erica, and Sarah, just jump in to answer a question. Unless it's specifically directed to anyone, we'll say that anyone may answer it. Can sharing of metadata go from Preservica to ArchivesSpace, or is it only from ArchivesSpace to Preservica?
Okay, Wendy here. I'll start first, but Sarah, do please chip in from your experiences. So the fundamental idea is that ArchivesSpace is the master of information, and that's the information, the metadata that's passed to Preservica. However, when we create the link and create the digital object, we have to give it a name, a title, and an identifier, so that is taken from Preservica. So on the whole, the transfer is from ArchivesSpace to Preservica.
Thank you. I like the idea of ArchivesSpace as the master of information, so that sounds good. What happens when the ASpace IDs change? We do a lot of round tripping, so those numbers, e.g. 809, change all the time.
So Preservica will follow the ArchivesSpace hierarchy. So if what we're talking about here is rearrangements, then if you pick a digital object up and transfer it somewhere else or move your ArchivesSpace around, we'll use that. We use the URIs as the core numbers once it's in place.
I think this is for Sarah. Can a user search across all issues of UB Today in Preservica?
Yes. The way that I kind of brought you into universal access, because I linked from the digital object in ArchivesSpace, it brought you directly to that issue. However, you can do a search directly in universal access for the title or perhaps the date that you're looking for, and you can definitely search that way.
And then to follow up on your migration of two ASpace repositories, are your repositories in the same installation / server?
Yes, they are. They are two different repositories within the same ArchivesSpace installation.
Perfect. Oh, and this is just a good general question. What is universal access?
I'm sure all of us could step in, but so universal access is our public access viewer for what's in Preservica. As you saw with Preservica, it's very much there for the archivist making lots of actions. It's a very easy out-of-the-box solution for presenting the data of the archives that you want to show. You have to make them public to make them available, so you don't see everything, and you can choose to make it publicly available, or you can choose to make it accessible by username and password only. But there's quite a lot of different themes and ways to display things, ways to filter and fast set on them as well that's available.
If I could jump in, it's essentially a WordPress site, correct, Wendy?
Absolutely, that is what it is built on. And so you can customize pages as well.
Right. So can Preservica be used to display digitized items similar to how Content DM displays digitized items? Is that what universal access is meant to be?
The point of Preservica, it is that place where we use fundamentally for the preservation, and the display is probably better for most people if it's used from universal access. It depends who your users are and what you want to give them ability to do. Obviously, Preservica has a number of roles, so people can have limited ability to do stuff, or to be able to have sort of management role to do everything. But I would say that the universal access is the better place for display.
And then Patricia has chimed in on in the chat. Universal access is the public access portal for Preservica. Thank you. Yeah.
One line, nice and simple.
Yeah.
And is universal access included in the package? Yes.
Perfect. Next question. Going back to the comment about round tripping and changing numbers frequently.
Okay.
Talking about rearrangement, it's a completely new resource once it's exported and re-imported.
Okay, then it may have to be that it has to be relinked again, because we do rely on the fact that items are kept together. But if it's something that is a useful feature improvement, then it would be brilliant to talk to you offline. If you want to get in touch, our email addresses at Preservica are the classic first name, surname, surname at preservica.com.
Yeah, and then Teresa has followed up, that's who's asking, wondering if it can be configured to use the ref ID, which is persistent.
Yes. We can choose what is the persistent ID. And then there was a question was, can we send data from Preservica to ArchivesSpace at the point of linking? If the data is available at the level we're working at, then we can transfer some information, other information other than just the standard. We transfer some IDs over, so those sorts of things are possible as well. There is some ability to pass some information over at linking.
All right, and then can you, if you have several partners in Preservica with you, give each of them a universal access portal tailored to them?
So we're probably, Erica here, can you step in? We're probably talking about, what's the word I'm looking for?
Are you talking about that you are part of a consortium, or I guess I'm trying to figure out what the several partners means here. So usually you only have one universal access portal with each of your Preservica instances. So you would have to have a different instance, but I'd have to clarify what you mean by several partners. But we do work with consortiums and have special pricing set up for them, if that's what you're asking about.
Yeah, and we can also, there's obviously some use of security tags, etc., to decide what's visible in one thing. So I think that's the sort of thing that if you get in touch with the support team or the info at, we can work through how that's possible.
Yes, exactly.
And Jill,
go on.
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say, Jill, who asked that question, has followed up. So a universal access portal could have sections?
It's quite flexible. I think it's a case of come and have a chat about the sorts of things you'd want to do. As Sarah's mentioned, different people use things in different ways. And if you make it depend on people's user roles, then potentially, yes, you could do that sort of thing.
Yep.
The question about the plugin for the PDF viewer, all of that's the rendering, the ability to see stuff is available. Most people start off with a Preservica that's the Cloud Essentials, and you know, that's it. You don't have to add loads of other bits and pieces. We do that for you.
And that question, just so I can read it for the recording, it was a question of if the plugin required for PDF viewer is pre-installed. Next question. Does Preservica consider the hierarchy to be a preservation object, meaning are changes to the hierarchy tracked with premise events?
Yes, we keep a history of all the activities that happen to every event, and if a parent is changed, then that will be logged.
All right, we're all caught up in the chat. So if anyone has another question, feel free to type it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask, you're more than welcome to. Another question in the chat. Does Preservica allow for custom reporting?
We have quite a few reports out of the box, and we have a data set that's available. I guess it depends on what sort of level of user you're at, whether you're one of our cloud users or whether you've got an enterprise piece. So it will depend on what level you're at and what you're after as to what's customizable. I mean, if it's a case of you wanting to choose different filters or facets, then those sorts of things are built in. We've also got, can Preservica be run locally outside of the cloud? We do have people that have on-premise instances. So if you look at our site, we have everything from cloud situations to people having enterprise and private clouds to people having on-premise. So all those permutations are possible. I think if you want, the next question is, what is the back end of Preservica? Whereas Universal Access is WordPress, Preservica is our proprietary software. And I guess if you want to get into a more detailed conversation about that, then do get in touch.
And then maybe a long shot, but does Preservica operate with Google Drive?
I'm just thinking through what we do at the moment. Not directly at the moment. One of the things, and we're moving into another area that we are very aware of, is that we are working on what we're calling an intelligent archiving engine, which enables us to go out and to harvest from a variety of the content management systems, things like OpenText and what have you. So that's an area that we are working on heavily at the moment. And although the Googles and Google Drives, we have to be careful which one's which, because some of those are databases, are some of the areas that we're looking
at. Teresa, I see your question. I'm going to come back to it, but since we're on the topic, how about SharePoint or OneDrive?
SharePoint for sure is one of the ones we've got, and I believe the connector is able to look at OneDrive as well. But at the moment, we are working on the OpenText and SharePoint as a deliverable for that, but that's an area we know is very important. Okay. And there is already an ability to ingest things like emails, PST files, websites, etc. on there. So although we classically do demos showing pictures and documents, it is entirely possible to ingest and preserve a vast array of other format types.
And I think if you look at the next question that Aaron had there, Wendy, about they want to be able to, they use their Google Drive as their locked storage system for digitized and born digital assets, and they want to move those files from Google Drive to Preservica. So I think that's what the question.
And if it's the content there, yeah. I mean, I think at this point, when we get into specific needs and probably large volumes, absolutely, this is something that we know is vital. Come and talk to us about it.
Exactly.
We can get one of the solutions architects to look at that with you.
Yeah.
I wish I knew everything, but it's a
I know.
multifaceted product. In some areas, okay, I'll pass that on to someone else.
Perfect. All right. And then going back to Teresa's question, follow up about recording changes to the hierarchy. Do the changes propagate through the whole chain? Meaning if a child or grandchild is changed, do all the siblings, parents, grandparents, etc., get new versions because of the new event, or is the change only known to the parent?
We identify changes by the modified date that's in ArchivesSpace. So if there are more changes than just the immediate one, then that will be recorded. Again, we can come and work through that with you. Make sure that we're being clear about that.
Oh, and then Erin, who was asking about Google Drive, we have a demo set for Thursday.
Well, if you've got a demo with Sherry, you'll be absolutely fine, and she'll get those answers for you. Yes, the next question is your cloud solution US government compliant, and we do use GovCloud as well. So yes, it is, and we have people who have their Preservicas there.
So I think someone has raised their hand, Jessica. I'm not sure how.
Yeah, if you'd like to unmute yourself. Oh, okay. If you just like to put your question in the chat, we will be happy to answer it. But going back to government compliancy, while that question's asked, where can we find info about U.S. government compliancy?
I think at that point we would have to, when you're talking with our representatives, get that information to you on that. It is through Amazon's cloud, though.
All right. What tools are available for bulk loading of documents and metadata into Preservica?
So the preparation upload tool will handle quite large volumes. It depends what you mean by a large volume, but we also have in progress a bulk uploading tool, which should enable us to take, and we do this already, perhaps people decommissioning a whole site or a whole set of email site or something like that, and moving that into Preservica, because we know that's the current situation at the moment, along with it with the metadata associated with it as well. So we can take a set of files, folders and associated metadata and get that into Preservica, mapping that structure either in one go or in parts.
All right, here's another question. I'm currently digitizing old Betacam tapes. I would like to know the proper way of preserving and archiving the files.
I think probably what we'd suggest is that we get in touch with the support team, the initial team who can give you some advice on that, absolutely. So if you'd like to reach out to the email address, the info@preservica.com, that would be the best way to get somebody who's an expert in tapes and digital and audio to give you some answers. I'm very happy to. We also have partners as well that we can suggest to if it's actually a matter of actually doing that first stage before it goes into Preservica too.
Sarah, question for you. Does UB have video content in Preservica?
We have just a handful of video content in Preservica. We currently provide access to most of our video content through a separate platform that UB kind of handles internally as part of our kind of separate digital collections, I would say. Part of the reason why we don't currently have a lot of audiovisual content in Preservica is because it takes up quite a bit of storage space, which of course there's a cost associated with that. So if there are kind of incidental video files that are part of a collection that has been donated to us, those normally, yes, do end up in Preservica and therefore are accessible through universal access. Anything that we are digitizing ends up in our digital collections platform, which is a separate part of the libraries.
Yeah, and we have people with all sorts of video content in Preservica, and when it's brought in, then a big part of what you can do on ingest or once it's in there is to migrate it to an access copy, so you keep your original part of the data model is allowing you to have preservation representation of it, and then a single or multiple access representations which you can keep up to date, so you can produce something that's quicker and easier to get out there for people to see, whilst keeping your original and keeping intermediate versions if you want as well. So yeah, video is something that there's a lot of people with a lot of video stored.
Yeah, and I think one of our newer customers that we talked about the last couple of months was the state of Colorado is actually using us is joined to basically preserve what they're digitizing, all their legislative videos from the 1970s to about 2010, and using us as a place to store and keep that up to date. So we do have a lot of expertise with video.
So there's a question that says, does Preservica support the cataloguing and recording of storage locations of physical items? At the moment, what we take from ArchivesSpace is the data that has been entered for the digital content itself. It does depend on you having an artifact that acts as the digital object for that at the moment, but I'm not wanting to step on ArchivesSpace's toes, but there is sometimes a desire from people to have the same thing on both sides, and it's something that we're actively looking at to see whether actually bringing that extra information over would be a useful addition.
And you can record locations within ArchivesSpace, so
absolutely
track there.
Yeah, so if it's in ArchivesSpace in the main part of the catalogue, then yes, it comes over to us.
We have about 3 more minutes, so we will leave the chat up, but I want to go ahead and thank Wendy, Erica, and Sarah for joining me today. This was really great, and thank you everyone who joined us. And we will answer the questions that are coming in the chat right now, but as a reminder, our next webinar in this integration series will be integrating with Aon on November 7th. Thank you, everyone.